Head Start program, the federal program that helps preschoolers from low-income families be ready to start school, faces a $406 million cut, which would kick 70,000 kids out of the program. And headlines across the country describe how local communities are already being hurt by these cuts to Head Start funding. Democratic Congresswoman Castor of Florida has met with Head Start families hurt by sequester cuts and wants children's programs to get the same attention that travel delays have gotten. Ron Herndon is chair of the National Head Start Association. Congresswoman, you first. Tell me about what you've discovered with constituents and what the sequester cuts have done to those kids in the pre-K stages of life.
Yes, 70,000 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds across America will lose access to the preschool Head Start classroom. Now, Head Start is intended for students who don't have every advantage in life to ensure that they are ready for elementary school. It's also important because it ensures that their parents are ready to work. 70,000 students across America, 2,000 in the state of Florida alone, because the Republicans refused to replace the sequester or sit down with us to negotiate a balanced plan.
You know, Mr. Herndon, I remember, my memory's pretty good for politics. I remember Barbara Bush, or the Bush family, was very big on Head Start years ago. It's not a left-wing program. It's very respected and cherished because we know it takes kids who normally would have a hard time in first grade catching up, and this gives them a real chance and an equal chance at the starting gate.
Right, that's absolutely true, and probably one of the saddest parts of the cuts is that most people are aware that it will mean 70,000 children will not be able to participate in Head Start, but that also means there are hundreds of thousands of nutritious meals that won't be served, hundreds of thousands of dental follow-ups that won't be made, hundreds of thousands of medical follow-ups that won't be made, literally hundreds of thousands of home visits to parents to help them prepare their children to do well in school that won't be made. And that's probably the saddest part of all, that we've snatched the rug out from under 70,000 of the most vulnerable children and families in this country.
And so these kids they'll miss a step or two at the age of 6, and then all through their school years, they'll never, perhaps in some cases, catch up.
Well, not only that, there's evidence that Head Start has been credited with lowering the childhood mortality rate in the entire country because of an emphasis that we put on health care and dental care.
I got you.
It's almost as if we've discovered the salt vaccine and we said, guess what, 70,000 of you all will not get the salt vaccine.
Let's go into the halls of Congress, Congresswoman. Why don't you, I mean, I'm not advising, I'm not a political consultant, I'm just a talker, but I've always wondered, why don't you go to the floor right now with a proposal like they did with the air traffic controllers or whatever, and say, how about an exception here, and force people like Boehner, who's not a bad person, to vote against it? Why don't you jam them with this the way that the traffic controller issue was raised?
Well, you know, we did that very thing in the House Budget Committee with our chairman, Chris Van Hollen. We offered an amendment just on Head Start to replace the sequester when it came to these 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Yeah. The Republicans said no. They said no unanimously, just like they did when we were talking about cancer researchers and medical innovation. Chris, they're not interested in real debt reduction. They just want these cuts. They want the sequester. But they're going to have to live with the fact that they're complicit in the dumbing down of America, and that 70,000 of our 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds are not going to have a Head Start in life. I was with parents and students last week in Tampa. I talked to one mother who said before Head Start, her 3-year-old could not speak. After 6 months in Head Start, now that young boy can communicate. That means he's going to have a better chance at life.
Mr. Herndon, how are we going to make this? We're going to get through this thing? I mean, you see the cutting edge to this thing. What's going to happen if this goes on?
Well, families who already are very vulnerable in this country are going to suffer even more. In our program, it means we close Head Start a week, 2 weeks earlier. We'll start 2 weeks later. That means that speech therapy that should be available for a young child that the congressman described will not occur. And again, the folks who already are suffering the most will be asked to suffer even more needlessly. So we certainly do hope that members of Congress can get together. We are aware Head Start has received bipartisan support in the past. We hope that common sense will prevail. And yes, most Head Start parents are not flying on airplanes, but we certainly do think that they and their children should be given just as much consideration as the folks who were standing in line.
Mr. Herndon, thank you so much for coming on. Ron Herndon, National Head Start Association Chairman, and U.S. Congresswoman Kathy Castor, who I met down in Tampa. Thank you for coming on, both. We're going to keep being a squeaky wheel here on these programs that are affecting real people. By the way, tweet us at